I left my boyfriend completely stranded on his birthday, waiting in an empty restaurant for a surprise that was surgically designed to break him. You think you know the person sleeping right next to you, until they casually laugh about a 6-month campaign of psychological torture they inflicted on an innocent kid. The unforgivable secret he bragged about around a campfire that night will make your stomach physically drop. By the end of this video, you will experience a dark, overwhelming satisfaction when you understand exactly why his own father defended the ruthless trap I set for his son. He led a boy to an empty bus stop. I led him somewhere worse. I sent him a text that morning wishing him a happy birthday. I told him I had a surprise planned. I told him to follow my instructions exactly, that everything would be perfect, and that he would understand when he saw me. He never saw me, but to understand how we got here, I need to take you back to where this all started. This story, as originally shared on Reddit, is told entirely from one person's perspective. That perspective is mine, and I want to be upfront. I have thought about this a lot over the years, turned it over from every angle, and I still do not regret a single decision I made that weekend. I was 26. His name was Thomas. 28, educated, genuinely funny in that easy way where you are not quite sure if he is charming or if you are just that comfortable around him. We have been dating for 7 weeks. 7 weeks is not a long time, but it is long enough to start trusting someone. Long enough to imagine a future that does not exist yet. Long enough that when everything falls apart, it actually hurts. He invited me to spend his birthday weekend at his father's country house. A small town, quiet roads, the kind of place where the air smells different than the city, and you feel a little lighter just being there. He wanted me to meet his two childhood friends, I will call them Ryan and Bart, and his father, who he spoke about with a kind of quiet respect that I always find telling in a man. The people you choose to introduce someone to really say a lot about who you are. I was genuinely excited. Thomas had this quality I noticed right away. He was always the one who made everyone feel included. At a party, at a dinner, wherever he was, he had a way of pulling people in without appearing to try. He was the person you looked for in a crowd when you walked into a room. I had started to think this was who he was. Not a performance. Just him. I was wrong about that. Before we get to the absolute fallout, let's do some real talk for a second. Look, this channel is brand new, and honestly, every single click on that subscribe button right now is keeping this project alive. If this story is making your blood boil just as much as mine did, join the family. Hit subscribe. Alright, enough of that. Let's go right back into the story. Here is how his ruin unfolds. Friday was easy and warm. His father, a quiet, thoughtful man who asked careful questions and actually listened to the answers, was exactly what Thomas had described. I liked him immediately. There was a steadiness to him, a kind of calm that felt earned rather than performed. I remember thinking that Thomas was lucky to have grown up with someone like that. Saturday started just as well. We spent the afternoon walking, the evening cooking, and by the time the neighbors came over and a fire got going in the garden, the whole weekend felt like the beginning of something real. And get this, I almost went to bed early that night. I was tired from traveling and from the wine, and I thought about slipping away around 10. But I stayed. I sat down near the fire, pulled a blanket around my shoulders, and stayed. I should have gone to bed. The group around the fire was loose and laughing. People were sharing old stories, embarrassing moments, school memories, the kind of harmless nostalgia that feels good at a certain hour of the night. I was listening more than talking, watching Thomas the way you watch someone when you are still learning who they are. He looked relaxed. He looked like himself. And then Ryan said something about a boy from their school, a name I had never heard. Arthur. I want you to stay with me here, because this is the part that I still cannot fully sit with even now. Thomas and his friends had found Arthur when they were 14 or 15 years old. He was isolated, quiet, the kind of kid who sat alone and kept to himself and gave people like Thomas absolutely no reason to target him, which, as it turned out, was reason enough. They went after him for months. Not a one-time thing. Not a stupid moment that got out of hand. Months of calculated, Sustained cruelty directed at a boy who had done nothing to earn it, but the jokes and the name-calling, that was only the first layer. They created a fake profile on one of those old instant messaging platforms we all used back then, pretending to be a girl, and they maintained it for months. They built an entire false relationship with this boy, messages back and forth, inside jokes, things that felt real because they were designed to. Arthur had no idea. He genuinely believed there was a girl who liked him. He sent her confessions. He sent her things you only say to someone you trust completely, the kind of words that cost something to write. And the whole time Thomas and his friends were reading those words out loud to each other and laughing. When they got bored, they arranged to meet him in person. They told him to take a bus to 2-3 hours from home and to wear a specific shirt as a signal so she would recognize him. He showed up. He stood there waiting. No one came. He found out the truth the next day at school when they told everyone. They shared what he had written. The private things. The honest things. Arthur stopped coming to class shortly after. He eventually transferred to a different school entirely, and Thomas was sitting across that fire, laughing about it. I went completely still. Not visibly. I did not move, did not speak, did not give any of them a single signal of what was happening inside me. But something had shifted in a way I felt physically, in my chest, like a door closing on something I had been walking toward, across the fire. I caught a glimpse of Thomas's father at the edge of the group. He had heard the end of the story. He was not laughing. He had the look of a man who has just learned something about his own child that he cannot put back. Thomas did not notice. He was still talking, still grinning, still completely at ease. I made my excuses and went inside. I lay in bed for a long time that night. The house was quiet. The room was dark. Outside I could still hear faint voices from the garden, then laughter, then eventually nothing. I did not sleep. I kept replaying the fire. Not the whole night, just that one section, that story, the way Thomas had told it without lowering his voice, or hesitating, or even pausing to consider who was listening. He had told it the way you tell a story you are proud of. Like it was a good memory. Like Arthur was a punchline to a joke that never got old. Hey, before we go any further, if this story is landing the way I think it is, a subscribe genuinely means everything on a channel this size. Okay, back to it because this is where it gets harder. Thomas came to bed around 4 in the morning. I heard the door, heard him moving in the dark, felt the mattress shift. I stayed perfectly still, eyes closed, breathing slow. I did not want to have that conversation in the dark at 4 in the morning. I did not want to have it in that house at all. I lay there thinking about Arthur. Not in an abstract way, in a specific way. I thought about the bus ride. 2 or 3 hours on a bus, watching the scenery change, probably nervous, probably rehearsing what he was going to say when he saw her. Getting off at the stop. Looking around, waiting, the slow, terrible creeping understanding that no one was coming. And then the long ride back. And then the next day at school, finding out it had been a performance the whole time. I do not know what became of Arthur. I never did. But I thought about him for a very long time that night. Now, stay with me here. Because here is where I almost let it go. Thomas was not a bad person in the day-to-day, visible sense. He had not done anything to me. What he had described happened 14 years earlier, when he was barely 15 years old. And I had been with him for 7 weeks, which is not long enough to be certain about anything. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting, if I was projecting something onto a person who had genuinely grown and changed. Maybe he was embarrassed and did not know how to show it. Maybe the laughter was discomfort, not pride. Then I remembered the way his face looked in the firelight when he told that story. The ease of it. The comfort. There was not 1 second of hesitation in him. That was not embarrassment. That was a man who had never once, in 14 years, thought about Arthur and felt anything other than entertained. I got up quietly at 6 in the morning. Thomas was asleep. The house was completely still. I gathered everything I had brought, a clothes bag, everything, and I moved through that house without making a single sound. I did not leave a note. I did not wake anyone. I went to the local train station, and I got on the first direct train heading back home. On that train, as the countryside moved past the window and the city started to appear in the distance, I made a decision. Thomas thought Sunday was his birthday. He thought I was planning a surprise. He was right that I was planning something, and just not what he imagined. I had originally planned a private lunch, something personal and thoughtful, a day built around him. Instead, I opened my phone, pulled up a Maps app, and picked a location completely at random, a point about an hour's drive from the house. Then I sent him a message, "Happy birthday. I have a surprise for you. Meet me at this address at 12:30. Follow the instructions exactly. I need to get there a little early to make sure everything is perfect." I put my phone down and watched the city appear outside the window. And here is the thing, part of me genuinely wavered. I am not going to pretend I was stone cold and certain the whole time. I had started to fall for Thomas. Not deeply, not in a way I could not recover from, but enough. The version of him I had believed in for 7 weeks was someone I had genuinely wanted to know. Letting go of that version still cost something, even as I was letting it go. But then I thought about a boy on a bus wearing a specific shirt, waiting alone at a stop in a town he did not know. The doubt did not last long after that. Thomas woke up and read my message around 10. He replied immediately. He was excited. He said he would follow the instructions religiously. He used that word, religiously. The trap was set. Every piece was in place. Thomas was already moving, already on his way, already completely convinced that this day was going to be exactly what he expected. He had no idea what was waiting for him at the end of it. He arrived at the first location at 12:30 on the dot. I know because he sent me a message the moment he pulled in. "I'm here. Where are you?" I told him there was a small delay. I apologized. I told him it would be worth it, and to be patient. Then I sent him a second address for a restaurant about 30 minutes away, and told him I was already on my way, that he should go ahead and get a table and order something. Order the best bottle on the menu. I want today to feel like what it is. Asterisk. He drove to the restaurant. He went inside. He got a table. I imagine he sat there looking at the menu, maybe a little impatient, maybe smiling to himself about whatever he thought was coming. I imagine he ordered that bottle of wine and poured himself a glass and checked his phone. I was sitting in my apartment, 2 hours away. Around 1:30, his messages changed tone. "Where are you?" Getting a little worried. "Everything okay?" Then he called. I did not pick up. He called again. I did not pick up. The messages kept coming. "Are you all right? Just let me know you are safe. I am not even worried about the surprise. Just tell me you are okay." And they kept coming. And I let them. At some point I stopped watching my phone. I made tea. I sat by my window. I gave it another 45 minutes. Then I sent one message. No explanation. No anger. Just a question. So, how does it feel to have people play with your feelings? I put my phone face down on the table and did not pick it up again for a long time. Here is where it gets interesting. A while later, an unknown number called me. It was Ryan, the third friend from the fire, the one who had stayed quiet through most of that story. His voice was tense. He told me that Thomas was devastated, that the whole birthday was ruined, that what I had done was completely out of proportion, that I had no right to do this to someone over something that happened when they were kids. I let him finish. Then I said, "Tell Thomas to stop calling me. And tell him that what I just did to him a wasted afternoon, a drive to nowhere." Unanswered phone is an extremely small version of what the three of you did to Arthur. I blocked the number. Thomas reached out for months after that. Messages, calls from numbers I did not recognize, a mutual friend who called me twice to say I had overreacted, that teenagers do stupid things, that I was being irrational. The mutual friend is someone I had known for years. Someone I thought understood me, told me I had been acting like I was out of my mind, that there were adult ways of handling disagreements and I had chosen none of them. Not gonna lie, that one stung, because part of me had already been asking myself the same question. Had I been unfair? Had I assigned an adult's full accountability to something done by a 15-year-old boy who no longer existed in that form? I spent a long time sitting with that dot, and then I kept coming back to the same thing. Not the cruelty of what they did, though that was real. Not the duration of it, though 6 months is not a phase, it is a commitment. What I kept coming back to was the fire, the laughter, the complete and troubled comfort with that memory 14 years later. No flicker of regret, no lowered voice when he got to the part about Arthur showing up alone at that bus stop, waiting in a town he had never been to, in a shirt chosen specifically so someone who was never coming could recognize him. Thomas's father called me a few weeks later, ostensibly about something unrelated. But before we hung up, he said he had not found sleep the night of the campfire. He said he had heard the end of that story, and he had understood immediately why I left. He told me he appreciated having met me. He said he did not try to speak for his son, but he wanted me to know that he understood my reasons. He did not ask me to reconsider. He was the only one who said that. And he was the only one whose opinion I have carried with me since. I have thought about Arthur over the years. I do not know his last name. I never could have reached out to him, even if I had, because some things that happen to a person are not yours to reopen, even with good intentions. Some doors you leave closed out of respect, not silence. But I hope he is well. I genuinely do. I hope he grew up and found people who were worth the honesty he gave that girl who was never real. And I hope, somewhere in his life, he still likes Elmer the elephant.